I was young, thought I knew something, you know. But due to something that I won't talk about, it has to do with almost being killed and some dumb things. I stay away from the trains these days, but there's a lot of craziness in the background years ago that I'm just going to leave out because it's too much heartache. Here's the basically, when you got to be from point A to point B, and you got no way to get there, you got to be there in a hurry, okay, take the train.
My first experience was back in Quakertown, Pennsylvania in 1955.
I would have a backpack, and in the backpack you take as little as you just possibly can, have to, because it's going to be with you however many thousands of miles you may put in, and that thing gets old and heavy in a hurry.
And we waited till 2 o'clock in the morning for the correct train to come along to make sure we had a place to ride, and about 2 o'clock, here it comes. And I said, that's the train we need. And the train stopped to change crews. We got on and climbed in the cars and got down on our piece of cardboard and laid low and kept our mouth shut, and about 25 minutes later, after they changed crews, we were off. And away we go westbound. We were all awake and we were watching stars and the moon and crossings. We went through Laramie, Wyoming. And after we went through Laramie, the sun was coming up. We saw the Big Dipper up in the sky, and I even remarked how big the Big Dipper was. It was so large that you had to turn your head to look at it and here, you know. We got a can of beans out and ate a can of beans with a spoon. We laid down on our cardboards and we slept. And when we woke up, we were pulling into Rawlins, Wyoming. Wow. That was my big train ride. We know who the FTRA is. They stand for Freight Train Riders of America. That started out many years ago, maybe 15 years ago or so. That was going to be a group of older elite railroad riders, and it took off into something that's it's bad today. We stay away from them. We know who they are, they know us. But we don't bother them and they don't bother us, and we don't mix with them, they don't mix with us.
Most of the stuff I did back in the very, very, very early days I don't even talk about much because too much heartache, too many things I don't want to remember. There was one little fella that called himself Chico, and I came to Britt one year and trying to see if he was around, and found out he'd been murdered in his little cabin along the railroad track.
Ride with a buddy, preferably two buddies, three guys. You never get in a box car or you never get in another container car with guys that you don't know. You never ride with people that you don't know. You could get killed or hurt. All they want to do, some of these guys, is kill you and rob you and throw you off the cars.
Hey, there's a lot of craziness in the background years ago that I'm just going to leave out because it's too much heartache. If I'd had any sense, I'd have saved pennies and dimes and had me a old rusted out, beat up car like I got now. And like I said, each hobo's different. They all have their own stories to tell and things to tell. And to a lot of them, like the Texas Madman, oh, if he were here, he's still riding the rails, always will. Probably die on the rails somewhere. To him, that's a glorious thing. I never seen anything glorious about it.
I just know that what we're doing is trying to educate people about the hobo and to preserve the legacy of the hobo. They're misrepresented. They are thought to be bums. They're not bums. Hobos want to work. He never wants to get anything for free. He lives by a very high moral standard. The tramp comes along. The tramp is he doesn't really like to work, and he will work if he has to, but he'd rather fly a sign saying, "Help me, I'm homeless." And then you get to a bum, which is not even related to a hobo or a tramp. They're just a person who doesn't want to travel or work, and they just, they'll bum for money to go get alcohol and whatnot. But the hobo today is not just a train rider. In the past, trains were the mode of transportation. The trains were free and they were exciting. Today, there are recreational hobos, recreational riders that ride for the thrill. But there are hobos all over this country and other countries, I'm sure, that are hoboing across America, either hitchhiking, riding bike, flying, and or just getting a beat up car and hitting the road.
You got to be reasonably intelligent, reasonably clean, reasonably knowledgeable about railroads and safety. Should you get put off a train, how to survive out in the wilderness, you got to know how to make a fire, you got to know how to cook your pot of coffee, you got to know how to work, to make a few bucks to survive. A little bit of knowledge about getting along with other people. You can't be a wino or a drunk or a dope. Dope is narcotics in any form is frowned upon. If a younger guy comes into camp and if he's smoking cigarettes, that's okay, but if he's drunk or if he's using dope, he'll get run out of the camp. We'll take him out of the camp because we don't want that kind of element around us.
If I'm packing to hit the road, the first thing I do, if I've got any money at all, is put a little beef jerky in this little brown bag, some soda crackers, dried fruit. Of course, I've always got a cup. If you happen to be near a stew pot and there's no bowls or whatever, you've got a cup to drink from, you've got a cup to brush teeth with, water teeth, whatever, soup. On the back of the pouch there hangs a spoon and a fork. Of course, you always want your ever faithful water bottle, which has a little blue pouch on the side there that has aspirins in it, lip balm.
Lip balm. The modern
Yes.
hobo uses lip balm.
Well, I use it mainly because I'm a bit allergic to the sun, and I spend so much time on street corners. It keeps my lips from cracking. It's medicated, so it can be used in a pinch to put on scratches, wounds, whatever, You always want a good hat with a decent brim on it. Shade the sun out of your eyes.
Over here we have my hobo arm. Here's the hobo going to the National Hobo Convention at Britt, Iowa. There's a little town sign on the railroad that says Britt. There's a pretty classy picture of a hobo walking down the railroad tracks with his bag on a stick. Here's another one.
Red, have you ever seen a hobo with a bag and a stick?
Not really, no. No, that's something from years ago. They would tie this bag on the end of the stick, and a lot of times that stick was a hoe, and they were called hoboys. Later on, it was shortened to hobo. They would knock on the door back in the early days of hoboing, and they would ask the old lady if she wanted her garden hoed for a meal.
Hoed as in with
like a hoe with clean the weeds out of the cucumbers and the
that's where it
tomatoes.
comes from.
Yes, that's one. That's the most common accepted origin where the word hobo came from.
What advice would you give a young person who is thinking about hitting the rails?
Don't.
You wouldn't advise it?
No, not ever. Not even.
Why?
For no reason.
But so you embrace that culture in that part of your life?
Well, I've certainly learned a long time ago that riding the rails is against the law. How can I hop on a train and then turn around and tell my son, don't do this? You're breaking the law. I have to be an example. And my example is don't do it, so I don't.
Right.
Plus, I say there's a lot of craziness in the background years ago that I'm just going to leave out because it's too much heartache. But at the same time, and my son, youngest son, has been with me many times, but never on the rails.
I met this one girl in Pennsburg, Pennsylvania last year. I asked her why she rode the rails and what got her started there. And she said she was from California. She started hopping freight at age 13. She left home and she's been on the rails ever since, and she was probably around 20 or so. She said the reason she left is she had no friends and no family, and she just looked like an interesting thing to do when she's done it. She doesn't appear to be afraid of anyone. Nobody messes with her that I know. She didn't tell of any bad stories. And there's the other girls that I have met have actually been traveling with men, and or with someone, and so they had no fear. But this girl was traveling alone, and she didn't even seem afraid either.
There was a man one time who was hungry, and he didn't have anything to eat. He did have a pot, and he had some water, and he made a fire, and he started heating the water. And then he reached over and he got a couple stones, and he put them in the pot. And a fellow came along and said, what are you cooking? He said, oh, I'm making some stone soup. He said, would you like to have some? If you have something to contribute, I'll share it with you. And so he said, well, I got a couple bones that I got from the meat market. That'll help. And another fellow came along and said, what are you cooking? Oh, I'm making some stone soup. And he said, would you like some? I said, well, sure. He said, do you have anything to contribute? He said, well, I got some potatoes. And another man came along. He had some other vegetables and celery and maybe some carrots and things like that. And the different things were put in the stone soup. And so the soup started getting thicker. One person had some flour. He put the flour in to thicken it. And when they finally served it, it was some of the most beautiful and delicious stew. And this is basically what a mulligan stew is, except they don't often start with a stone. They start with something in the stew, and when a hobo comes into the jungle, he can expect a cup of coffee and a bowl of soup, or stew, and he is expected to contribute to that stew before he leaves.